So the evil eye is a negative force, or essentially a curse that is cast through a glance, a look. How do you get well, first of all, the root of the evil eye. What is the root? The root of the evil eye is emotion. It's envy, it's jealousy, it's resentment, it's anger, any sort of negative emotion. The evil eye can come upon you, or it can be cast in one of three ways. The first way is intentional. Someone absolutely is just angry with you, is jealous of you. They want you to know it. They don't care if you know it. They'll look you straight in the eye and throw you some shade. They'll give you a nasty comment. They'll give you that look that you can recognize, because sometimes it makes you stand back and go, oh, what's that person? Look at how they looked at me. They're just angry. And they intentionally want you to know that. And so they do wish you harm, yes, or they're angry about what you have, what you've achieved. So the first is intentional. In Christianity, in the Bible, when you look at it, it is actually alluded to in many, many areas of the Bible. Look at the first one, the Sermon on the Mount, okay? What does Jesus of Nazareth say? The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then light is within you, how great is the darkness? Okay, so you're thinking about that here, and for many scholars, that was discussed as alluding to the evil eye. It's jealousy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're in for a fun conversation on a brand new topic. We are diving into some uncharted waters here on the podcast. Our guest is Antonio Pagliarulo, and he recently wrote a book called The Evil Eye, and it's subtitled The History, Mystery, and Magic of the Quiet Curse. And so, Antonio, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for making time for us.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here, Glenn.
Definitely. So before we get into your book, maybe take a few moments to tell us about yourself, especially for people who aren't familiar with you and your work. What do you do? Maybe a bit about your journey that brought you to where you are today.
Yes. So I'll start. To me, it's an interesting journey. I don't know if people think it's interesting, but I'm a full-time writer. I write, a lot of nonfiction articles. I've been published, in a lot of wonderful publications, and this book, The Evil Eye, came out in May. I have been writing my whole life, and I grew up. I was born in Manhattan, grew up in the Bronx. This ties into a lot with what I write about in The Evil Eye. I grew up in a home. My parents were immigrants from Italy, so my siblings and I, we lived in what's this typical sort of two-family house as they had in the Bronx, and they still do. We lived upstairs. My maternal grandparents lived downstairs, also from Italy, and I grew up very, very much with this, what we now refer to as the folk magic. My grandmother was very, very much a practitioner of this. She could diagnose the evil eye, she could detect it, she could remove the evil eye. And growing up, walking downstairs into her kitchen, we saw bowls of water and olive oil, and there were things everywhere, the sort of the accoutrements there of this magic. And people would call from the neighborhood, people would call it from different states, people would call from Italy, people would call from all over to get my grandmother to take off the evil eye. And in the town where she was from in Italy, that there were a few people who sort of had this tradition. It was handed down from their mother, in some cases a father. But my grandfather also was very big into hand gestures, like for healing, for removing. I remember I had a sore throat once, and he, sat there with me and made me do all these sort of hand gestures, and I was like, what are you making me do? But I remember that very vividly. And he believed very much in the power. He did everything according to the moon. He had gardens, our garden in the Bronx. He did everything, of course, according to the moon, but he also made wine in the basement of our home. And he would do everything according to the phase of the moon. He would move something up, move something down. And yet, when I tell people, my grandparents were devout Roman Catholics. didn't know anything about this, you don't call them witches. They, if I did that, my grandmother's probably hitting me in the head right now with a slipper for saying that,
Right.
because that would be a no-no. They were just practicing, the folk magic, but they were practicing these rituals that they had known all their lives. So I
Yeah.
grew up with that, and that really formed, I would say, the basis, the foundation of my own life
Hmm.
as not only a magical practitioner, but as someone who writes and researches, and is just it's completely my life,
Yeah.
and it's been that way, for really as long as I can remember. It's within me, and it's infuses every aspect of my life. So
Yeah.
that's where the foundation came from. And today, even, writing as I do, I've interviewed many, many, many pagans, witches, scholars, historians, everything,
Mm.
you can think about. And I always say I feel very, very blessed to have been raised with the tradition of magic and the magic of tradition, because they both
Mm.
go hand in hand for me there.
So evil eye, like this is something that this is language, terminology, ideas that you grew up with, because you mentioned that your grandmother practiced these different things. And so this has been part of your life for a long time. But I think a lot of our listeners probably super new to a lot of people. So maybe you can give us kind of like the rundown of what the evil eye is. And I want to ask you specifically later on about how its presence comes up in Christianity and other
Mhm,
religions and religious texts, because that totally blew my mind. And that's something I want to dive
mhm.
into in a minute. But maybe give us
Yeah.
like the lay of the land or the bird's eye view of what exactly is the evil eye. When we say that, like, what are we talking about?
So when we're talking about the evil eye is a negative force, or essentially a curse that is cast through a glance, a
Mhm.
look. How do you get well, first of all, the root of the evil eye. What is the root? The root of the evil eye is emotion. It's envy, it's jealousy, it's resentment, it's anger, and any sort of negative emotion.
Mhm.
And the evil eye can come upon you, or it can be cast in one of three ways. The first way is intentional.
Mhm.
Someone absolutely is just angry with you, is jealous of you. They want you to know it. They don't care if you know it. They'll look you straight in the eye and throw you some shade. They'll give you a nasty comment.
Mhm.
They'll give you that look that you can recognize, because sometimes it makes you stand back and go, "Oh, what's that person? Look at how they looked at me. They're just angry."
Mhm.
And they intentionally want you to know that, and so they do wish you harm, yes, or they're angry about what you have, what you've achieved. So the first is intentional. The
Mhm.
second way, unintentionally. And this comes into play when you think about, I know growing up in an Italian household, whenever somebody gave you a compliment, if you said, "Oh, the baby's beautiful," it was always followed by "God bless you."
Mhm.
Or, you in some places, in parts of Italy, they spit. You would walk around, if someone said something, you did the horn gesture, and that was just, some people knock wood.
Mhm.
There are different sayings in different cultures, and when you get a compliment or when you give a compliment, that is to make sure that you don't unintentionally cast the evil eye, because even though you might not be aware that you have sort of an underlying, maybe even a subconscious envy
Mhm.
or jealousy for a person or a family or a house or a car,
Mhm.
something. So when you're delivering this compliment, it might be unintentional, and that's why you'll say, "God bless you," or knock on wood, or make a hand gesture, things like this. The third way you get the evil eye is by it's pretty much self-induced. You bring it upon yourself by boasting, and you kind of tempt fate. This goes into when people talk about, but it comes up a lot when I talk about social media, and I tell people, it's nice that you posted a picture of your brand new house, and you should be proud of that, and you should be proud of the achievement, and it's a wonderful thing. Your garden is beautiful, the house is beautiful, the renovations are beautiful, but there's a line between celebrating it and achieving it, and then sort of boasting about it to the point where you're sort of going to poke that sense in people, that is a very natural thing. And that's also, so well, before I go on, the third way so is to boast and to bring it upon
Mhm.
yourself.
Mhm.
And you have to remember that when we say the evil eye, it is a supernatural occurrence, but it has a very natural source, and that source is human emotion. This is
Mhm.
why the eye goes back so far in history, and this is why it has survived, because every human, it's part of the human condition. We have all experienced feelings of jealousy, of anger, resentment, negativity. We've all experienced those feelings, whether or not we want to admit it. And we have probably, most of us have been on the receiving end of someone's jealousy, of someone's anger, of someone's hatred. So it has a very natural source. There's no eradicating it because you're human, you're going to feel those emotions. So I often tell people that the book is a friendly reminder about a very unfriendly topic, because most people don't want to talk about who they're jealous of, who they're resentful, what circumstances they're resentful about, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of the quick, or perhaps not so quick if I talk too much, runaround about what the evil eye is, and I apologize for that.
No, that's perfect. So what are some examples then? You mentioned a few different ways that this plays out in everyday life, but what are some like specific ways that this would pop up in normal life? Like, think of our average listener again, who maybe has never heard of this, or they have little understanding of it. Like, why is it important to be aware of the evil eye, and then where might it pop up? Like you mentioned those three different ways that it comes about. And you also mentioned in the book about how it's tied to different traditions. I think like the bride wearing the veil and things like that. Like it seems like it's everywhere, even if we're unaware that it's there. And so, like, what are some specific ways that it like pops up in everyday life?
So and in the book, I talk about the signs and the symptoms, and I give people literally list of signs and symptoms that you might not think about. It manifests in physical, in the body, in physical ways. You get that headache out of nowhere. And, maybe, the 2 aspirin or the Advil, they're not taking it away. You don't understand where it came from. It comes on suddenly, it's persisting. Maybe it's exhaustion that comes out. It's, the sense of lethargy. I can't get anything done, a distraction. In some cases, people will experience, have you ever gone through that day where you start out, you drop your coffee cup in the morning, and then all of a sudden 2 hours later, you drop the keys, and then you go to work, or you're in the supermarket and you drop 4 other things, and you're like, what's going on here? What is that about? It's an uncommon occurrence, really, if it is for you. Those are signs that you look at. Then you see things on a bigger scale. Where in your life, if you have this run of a series of unfortunate events, as they say, and this has been from my own experience from people who have come to me and asked about it, and who've said, well, look, in the past month, here's what's happened in my house. 4 people got sick. The refrigerator went down. The pipe in the basement burst. There's a leak in the roof. The car broke. I've been fighting with people. So there are all these ways in which we often overlook when we just shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's life. It's a bit of bad luck. Not necessarily, no. This is where you think about the evil eye and the power of negativity and a negative force. So it manifests in so many ways, and that's why I talk about the importance of being aware of it, because once you're aware of it, you begin to think differently about your relationship to not only your own energy, but to the energy of other people, and how that energy can impact you and your loved ones, your home, your work. It doesn't necessarily have to be you. It can be your home. It can be your car. It can be your career. It can be your financial life. It can be a certain aspect of your health. And this goes back to saying, and I've said it, I said it in a video that I posted a while ago, and people, reacted a lot to it, that we have to think about realistically. It's not only people, you think about the people in your past, maybe the ex
The people that
lovers,
don't
the
like
ex
you.
friends, people that don't like you, quote
Right.
unquote. And yeah, they're in the past, but it's not only that. There are people in your present. There are people around you right now, unfortunately, and this is a truth. It's an uncomfortable truth. There are people around you right now who do not want you to live your best life for whatever reasons. They do not want to see you prosper. They do not want to see you succeed. They don't want you to get the good job, get the house, get the relationship. They just don't. That's an unfortunate fact. We don't like to think about it, but it's real. And that's where becoming aware of the evil eye is so significant, because sometimes those events in your life that are happening, that you're thinking, I'm just getting a run of bad luck. It's not always just a run of bad luck. There is a source for it, and there's an explanation for it. And that's called the evil eye.
Yeah, it makes me think too, like, it's not like you said earlier that it could be a situation where somebody intentionally doesn't like you. They intentionally don't want to see you succeed. They intentionally, like, they have it out for you, so to speak. Like, they don't want to see you rise up at all. But it could also be, from what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but people who just have a general demeanor with maybe they're unhappy with themselves, they're unhappy with their own life. And so like I would think that
Certainly.
if that dissatisfaction with themselves could very easily come off on, I don't really want to see anybody else succeed or it's anybody else rise because I'm stuck down here in the mud. And so could that also be a situation where the evil eye makes its way into
Well,
somebody's life?
absolutely,
Yeah.
because misery loves company,
Mm,
right? I mean, what happens if you're down there and you are, for whatever reasons, you're in that space, you're in that negative space.
yeah.
The first, you want other people to sort of sit there and understand it with you and feel it with you. But when you do see that person who's not in misery,
Yeah.
that's when the jealousy, or that's when the envy pops up.
Yeah.
So yes, I do believe what that example you gave is extremely valid. That whole
Mhm.
misery, yes, people can be very, very unhappy with themselves, their life
Yeah.
circumstances, the choices they've made. In some cases, just things that have happened to them that necessarily, we all say, things happen not necessarily because of choices we made. Sometimes things happen.
Yeah.
How you react to them, is how you determine, your way forward.
Sure.
Also how you're going to deal with it in the present, but your way forward. But if you are in that place of, misery, as you said, if you're in
Yeah.
that place of just down on it, yes, of course, you're going to inevitably look at someone somewhere and
Yeah.
feel a real spike in jealousy and
Yeah.
envy. And that's where you
Yeah.
get the evil eye.
All right. So a lot of our listeners are from a Christian background. A lot of them are from the
Hmm.
evangelical background in
Hmm.
particular. And I think that probably like 99.99% of them are doing what we call like deconstruction, right? Like we're
Hmm.
deconstructing, we're rethinking a lot of things that we were handed regarding God and the Bible and
Hmm.
spirituality, things like that. But even
Okay.
so, and being one of those people, I know this to be true, there's oftentimes this voice inside. I like to call it like the evangelical soldier voice, and he's
Uh-huh.
shouting, and he was shouting while I was reading your book too, that like this is all a bunch of baloney, right? Like there's no such
Sure.
thing as the evil eye. It's not in the Bible. It's not Christian. Like this is a
Hmm.
cult. This is New Age. This is
Hmm.
demonic craziness, right? Like pause the
Sure.
podcast. Don't buy the book. Forget everything you've read so far.
Right.
And so talk to us about this because you have this section in your book, and I alluded to it earlier, but you talk about how the evil eye is found in many religions and in
Hmm.
many religious texts, including the Bible. And that's the chapter that really got me because while that little voice was chattering away, I come across this chapter that says, all about the Bible and stories in the Bible I'm very familiar with. So maybe you can take us down that rabbit hole a little bit of where this pops up in various religions and religious texts.
Yes, and I specifically took out lots of my notes because I have so many notes about that. Because I
Yes.
said, "Oh, I'm going to get my notes for this because I
Yes.
know I want to be as specific as possible."
Thank
But the
you.
funny thing you said about the voice that
Hmm.
comes to you. So I think I mentioned it in my book. I was raised in the Catholic Church,
Yeah.
and I was educated by nuns,
Hmm.
and I always refer to them as my nuns. And for the most part, I had a I went to a grammar school, and I very good education, very, for the most part, pretty cool nuns. But I have, in a different way, you say you have that voice. I understand the source of what you're talking about because for me, it comes out in work. I always tell people I have Sister Mary deadline on this shoulder and Sister Mary get it done on this shoulder.
Right.
So whenever I want to stop doing something, it's the poke of what are you doing?
Yeah.
You got stuff to hand in. You better do that now because
Right.
you're going to overwork yourself because that's what you should do, kind of
Yep.
thing. So I understand exactly about the voice. They're always here. And I always say that when people have said to me, you got that done already? And I'm like, yeah, and it's exhausting, but that they're here,
The
sister and
voice
sister.
got it.
So I
Right.
get the voice.
Voice
Yes,
pushed
mine. It's
me.
and in truth, growing up, it's interesting. Christianity, the culture and where culture and Catholicism came in, and you can not only Catholicism, you can also see it Eastern Orthodox in Greek culture. You have the concept of the evil eye is huge. That's where you see all over Greece, all over actually the Middle East. You can see the most common symbol, the Nazar, which is the blue, the white, the black. The circle there, the concentric circles, what people call the evil eye jewelry. Um, Even in Catholicism, I was younger and I wore, as I state in the book, Italian culture. You wore a horn. You wore these horns. You wore.
Mhm.
Some people think of it as a red pepper. It's not. It's a red horn. those are amulets, the cornicello, the mano cornuto. These are amulets that ward off the evil eye. So I wore those right alongside a cross and right alongside, the medal of St. Anthony or the medal of St. Therese of Lisieux, or Archangel Michael, which I'm wearing right now. So there was this, and many of the, growing up, I did have many of the instances where either a teacher or in some cases a nun said, what are you wearing that for? You shouldn't be wearing that, because the idea is you shouldn't give power to amulets or beliefs. Everything goes back to God. Don't even, growing up Catholic, you give, the saints are intercessors. There's this whole thing. So, but you get going back to the evil eye. So in Christianity, in the Bible, when you look at it, it is actually alluded to in many, many areas of the Bible. Look at the first one, the Sermon on the Mount, okay? What does Jesus of Nazareth say? The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then light is within you, how great is the darkness? Okay, so you're thinking about that here. These are references that can absolutely be looked at as, what is that darkness? This goes back to the emotion of what you're experiencing: envy, jealousy, greed, anger. The darkness isn't necessarily always those emotions, but it's also how you choose to see the world in relation to, are you going to see your blessings, or are you going to see your lack of them? And in that lack, are you going to be angry about someone who has something else? So the eye of the body there is mentioned, and for many scholars that was discussed as alluding to the evil eye. It's jealousy. The parable of the workers in the vineyard. These workers are going to realize that they have been working for a very long time. Workers who have worked for that day far fewer hours are going to be paid the same amount. Okay. And the landowner responds to them. I think the quote is, he says basically, is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil because I am good? That refers to the jealousy of the workers who have worked far more hours, but why are you giving these ones who worked far fewer hours, the same amount of money? It shouldn't be that way. There's some level of injustice there. So, there's a jealousy there. There's envy there. There's the scholar John Eliot wrote a few volumes called Beware the Evil Eye, and he talks about it not only in the Bible, but throughout other facets of history. And he theorized, I believe, that the scriptures in their original languages held as many as, I think it was 23 or 24 direct references to the evil eye, and they were sort of veiled or removed by modern biblical scholars. You can look at it also, when you go back in the Old Testament, when you look at the commandments. What is the commandment? Thou shalt not covet. What does that refer to? What is coveting? What are you doing? That's jealousy. You're thinking, you're thinking of what someone else has. You covet that someone else has. That's the same thing as envy. So when you're looking at that commandment, you're referring to the envy that you feel. You're coveting someone else's home, someone else's wealth, someone else's anything. That's where you get into the idea of what the root of the evil eye is.
Yeah, I love that. I love that there's all those references, because you're bringing to light, and this is what I love about and where I'm at now, with the Bible, is that there's so many things that are there that I never saw before, because I was always taught to read it through one specific narrow lens. But then when I come across somebody like you, who's well, here's this topic, and here's how this topic is here, here, and here, it's oh my goodness, there's so much more to this ancient text than I ever thought that there was.
And I'm sure, other biblical scholars can certainly talk much more about it and bring other things up. And when I refer to the Ten Commandments, of course, I'm going, I went from sort of the New Testament to the Old Testament there in sort of this shift, but but you can see where it's alluded to there, very much so. I mean, when you're talking about, and I've said that to many people when I people would argue, not argue in a bad way, but they'd say, what do you mean? It's nowhere, that's not the Bible, nowhere, Old Testament, New Testament, that's not the Bible, it's
Yeah.
nowhere there. And I would say, what is one of the main commandments?
Yeah.
And it says it right there. I mean, the word alone, covet,
Yeah.
is it when you really break that down. And I mean, you sit there and you break it down honestly, sit with it. What does it mean? Thou shalt not covet. Don't be jealous, stop sort of lusting after things that you don't have, that someone else does.
Yeah.
It makes you angry.
Yeah.
So I mention that in the book with regard to, certainly with Christianity. In Islam, you can find it. I know when I quoted the Encyclopedia of Islam, I know it said, where I said the evil eye is believed that the evil eye may have fatal consequences, and a hadith even specifies it as the cause of half of all human deaths. A Moroccan proverb puts the figure at 2/3. There are references, many scholars will reference verses 51 and 52 of Al-Kalam of chapter 68 as being linked directly to the evil eye. You go back to the hadith, the collected traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, and it's believed, the Prophet said, the evil eye is real. If anything were to overtake the divine decree, it would be the evil eye. So you have these writings that are very much there. Many Muslims I interviewed and spoke to, by far, absolutely believed in the evil eye. And very often goes back to what I said, when you give a compliment, many Muslims will say, MashaAllah, which means may it be as God wills, or so that's also to ward away this idea of the evil eye, of potential envy, of potential jealousy, of potentially getting negativity unintentionally, perhaps. So you give a compliment and they do say MashaAllah. They also I've been told, many of them said that when they believed they had the evil eye, there were specific little rituals aside from the previous verses I mentioned. Many talked about taking baths. That was a very common way to remove the evil eye. So you can see it there. The last 3 surahs, I believe, of the Quran are recited for 7 nights, if I'm not mistaken. I do go about this in the book more. But those are also the evil eye is alluded to very much there in the Quran. In Judaism, I mean, the morning prayers, and also I can tell you, and this is very much a part of my life, because my husband is Jewish. And so every morning, he says his morning prayers, and there are, the evil eye is very much implied in one of the lines of the prayer, where they talk about the gaze, the look of another person, protect us from, the evil that may come up, the envy that may come up. So you can start there. It's not explicitly mentioned in the Torah, although it's deeply implied in certain places. In Genesis, Jacob blesses his son Joseph, saying he will be, quote, like the fruitful vine by a fountain hanging over a wall. The rabbis of the Talmud changed the reading of the Hebrew word from the passage to reinterpret the blessing to mean that Joseph's descendants will not be susceptible to the evil eye. That blessing, and it's reduced over time, the phrase Ben Porat Yosef, translated to a fruitful son. That the first 3 words of the blessing now it's used by Sephardi Jews to ward off envy, jealousy, again, the evil eye. It's also, I mean, I'm trying to be the story of Hagar and Sarah, the miscarriage, Sarah's glance, was believed to cause a miscarriage. The ritual of on Tashlit, the ritual of Tashlit is the ritual that's done on Rosh Hashanah when pieces of bread are cast into the water, and this is to represent the sins. And it's believed fish can eat the bread because the fish cannot be victim to the evil eye. So you can see it, and again, going back, of course, to the commandments. You go back to Exodus and Deuteronomy, and you see, you get that commandment. That for me was always this big thing. You see that, what do people always think about in terms of those commandments? You go back to them and you think that one that I constantly mention about the coveting, that too. These are all alluded to very
Yeah.
clearly in the evil in the Bible, in the Quran, in some of the Jewish texts, but many people don't. It's not that they don't necessarily know it or see it, but a lot of people don't want to sort of think about it being alluded to because they perceive the evil eye as this new age concept that's somehow related to spirituality and not religion, or it's
Yeah.
somehow related to witchcraft.
Hmm.
It's somehow related to the modern and increasingly popular practice of magic
Hmm.
today, that this is what the evil eye is. And in fact, when you look at it from the perspective of religion, you can see it in the old texts. You also see it, in Hinduism, very much Zoroastrianism, you can find it.
Mm.
So you see it in the religions, and you can also see the evil eye, of course, as I mentioned, I talk about, but culturally across so many cultures
Mm.
all over the world. It's very, very ubiquitous. But there's that line that you can see running through the religious texts as well. You will find the alluding to envy all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
jealousy, greed, because
Mm.
these are, again, unfortunately, but they are facets of the human condition, and that's
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like when I was first recommended your book and that you'd be great to come on the podcast to talk about this, I was like, "What is
Mhm.
this book?" It's like because I got the book and I completely judged it by the cover, and I just thought to myself, "I don't know what I'm getting into." And I was reading it, and again, like that voice going, "This, like you said, this is new age. This is occult stuff. Like what are we dabbling in?" But then, as I started to really think about it, and I got to that part about where it is in other religions. I started
Yeah.
to go back into my Bible and like think about these different stories. I'm like, it really is all over the place because I was thinking, about that story of Joseph, and you think about Joseph and
Of course.
how, he had this special relationship with his father, and
Father,
his
yeah.
brothers are jealous of that
They're
relationship,
jealous.
and
Yeah.
so maybe that there could be the evil eye coming from them because what happens to him after that? He gets thrown into a ditch, then he gets sold into slavery, and then he gets ends up in Potiphar's house and he gets in trouble there, and then he ends up in jail, and he's got all these like these series of bad events, like you said, happening to him.
Horses.
And yeah, and like
Yeah.
maybe that is the result of the evil eye coming from his brothers. And so then I started to look at like these other stories in the especially the Old Testament about very similar types of relationships between people and how
Mhm.
the person on the receiving end of that evil eye has all these unfortunate things happen to them. Then I went into like the New Testament thinking even about like Jesus, like you said about the Old Testament with the commandments, not to covet. Jesus said, if your eye causes you to sin, he says, gouge it out, right? So maybe there's a link there to the evil eye as well.
And and also when we look back and we look at this concept or this idea and we take it outside of the realm of just religion or just
Hmm.
the sacred texts, we look at it historically, the symbolism, the eye going, Egypt, ancient Egypt, the eye was on boats, on
Hmm.
coffins. It was a symbol of protection.
Mm.
We know that, and it can go. Many scholars believe it goes as far back as Mesopotamia.
Hmm.
I think it was in 1938 that there was an excavation at Tel Brak, and they excavated these many, 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 many little eye idols. And now in
Mm.
this building that I believe in now called the Eye Temple.
Mm.
But the eye itself has always been historically, if you look at it, this symbol across many cultures, this symbol of power. Um, and it holds power. The look holds power. The lamp of the body, or what emerges. And don't forget that back in the day, there was the theory of extramission versus intramission. We know that
Mm.
today, the science of sight, sort of accomplished by intramission. But back in the day, it was believed that the eyes actually emitted these actual rays of energy, and
Mm.
that was extramission. That's how sight was accomplished. That your eyes sort of took on something and were able to. They were like these little tendrils that kind of went out there and clasped
Mm.
onto something. That was a common belief. I go through that briefly in the book about the science of that and who believed in it back when it changed, and um, but also how there have been modern, in more recent times, experiments done about what energy sort of is emitted from the eyes,
Mm.
and going back to that idea of intromission. So, and I've heard people speak about the Sermon on the Mount, and when Jesus is talking about the eyes and the lamp, is he in that sense referring also this light, this energy, the body emitting from the body? Is that a reference as well? If you want to
Mm.
think of it, that possible, to extra mission? Is that? I mean, now, I know I'm really going to get people going on that one, but I think I stated there. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
You can think about it. You can think about it.
Yeah.
Um, it is in so many places in the religious text, but also outside of the religious text when we go back into history, and
Yeah.
and we see it through so many, culture, thousands of years, thousands.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna ask you because I mean, New Testament, I think 2000-ish years old. You think some of the Old Testament books, 4,000, 5,000 years old.
Hmm.
Like, so this idea dates way back. So this isn't like it's not a new idea. Like you said, it's not even
Mm-mm.
something that's contained within for our Christian listeners, like the time of the Bible. Like this goes way beyond that. Because like you said, this is a human condition. This is something that
Hmm.
people have been observing in the world since ancient times.
Ancient times, very,
Yeah.
very much so. So
Yeah.
it's and the other, and that brings us to the question of, you know, how is there were so many, superstitions and what
Mm.
have you back then, but how is it that the evil eye, this concept that a look can cause um, pain, it can cause, so many bad things to occur. How did that concept survive, and why did it survive? I believe it survived because we all know that deep down it's true.
Yeah.
We all know what we feel when the energy, when jealousy comes out. We all know that. Also, look back on this idea that I also mentioned. There's a wonderful book called The Sense of Being Stared At.
Mm.
And it's all about just that, the sense of
Mm.
being stared at. And these examples often make me think about the power of a look and the energy that's contained within them. This has happened to most of us, okay? You've been sitting, maybe you're on the park bench, maybe you're just hang in your car, maybe you're just in wherever you are outside, and you're with your book, you're with your magazine, maybe you're with your tablet, you're going through things, you're alone, and all of a sudden you felt that, and you look over your shoulder, or you look up, and someone's staring at you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know who that, you catch someone staring at you.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of it, the funniest, and maybe you go into that crowded room, and again, maybe it's the friend you had a fight with, it's the family member you're not supposed to speak to, or who doesn't speak to you, the ex you had a fight with. They're standing quite a few feet away, but you get behind the column or you get behind a bunch of people because you just want to stare at them and see what they're doing, or you want to see how they
Mm-hmm.
look, or you want to see this.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're doing a good job of keeping yourself concealed. But all of a sudden, what happens? They'll turn around and they'll catch you.
Mm.
Have you ever had that experience where you're staring at someone and they sort of look your way and you're like, oh, I got caught?
Yeah.
What is that sense of being stared at? Is also very valid in terms of thinking about the evil eye in relation to the energy that's emitted from the body and the energy that we are just receptive to or can be
Yeah.
receptive to. And that you could see it too in the animal kingdom with predator prey,
Mm.
relationships and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's I know I got off topic there, but it was just something fascinating that I always want people to think about.
So on that note, let's end with a couple of like practical questions, if you will. And I wrote when I
Hmm.
was reading the book, I have like a whole list of questions because I was thinking, I wonder what like our listeners would ask if they were kind of on the mic with us. So I have a bunch that I want to ask you, but I'm gonna go with two because I think that's what we
Yeah.
have time for. So my two questions are, and you can answer them in whatever order you'd like to, is number one is like how can you make sure that you yourself aren't giving the evil eye to someone else? Because I don't want to give the evil eye to anybody. I mean, I
Hmm.
deep down inside, like I really do want people to prosper, be happy, all the different things. But like you said, it's a human condition. There are times when I might feel jealous. There are times when I might want what somebody else has. And my intention is not to give them any kind of curse or put anything bad or energy into their life, but I very well might do that, like you said earlier, not on purpose. So what can I do in my
Hmm.
own life to kind of guard against that happening? And then number two
Hmm.
is if I sense that like the evil eye, the energy has come into my life. You talked about like your grandmother and some different things that she would do to kind of get rid of it. Um, as
Hmm.
someone who has no idea what they're doing and who is very new to obviously this whole topic, like what can you do? What can our listeners do if they sense that they've been the recipient of this energy?
So the first question, I was taught, you always said something as simple as you gave your compliment and you said, "Oh, the house is beautiful. Congratulations." That we were taught to always follow that with, "God bless you. God bless the house." There are ways though that if you don't, many people will tell you, "Well, I don't want to go that and say God bless you. I might feel strange doing that." Simple words, simple actions. This house is beautiful. The baby's, may it always be so. I mean
Mm,
that.
mm-hmm,
Words are very attached to your intentions, and if your intention is pure and you know that it is,
mm-hmm,
um, I I think you're pretty much okay in terms of not casting the evil eye. But look at what your own um, practices are, your own
mm-hmm,
spiritual practices are, if you have any, and perhaps think about that idea of saying, "You know what, if I'm going to give a compliment, I don't want to give somebody the evil eye unintentionally. So, maybe I'm going to add that with, God bless you." Or maybe if I don't say that out loud, after I give a compliment, I'm going to say it to myself, silently, to God bless them. So, any sense of giving away the evil eye is negated
mm-hmm,
there, and I'm not going to, give it unconsciously.
sure.
So I would say look toward your own spiritual. I know people who said they looked at their own, the psalm. They picked a psalm, a verse,
Mm-hmm,
or from any religious or any spiritual text, particularly.
mm-hmm,
Some recited the name of a deity to themselves. Some recited a particular phrase or quote to them that had a powerful meaning.
mm-hmm.
Those are ways that that will ensure that you're not giving the evil eye, because it connects to your intention there.
So you can almost
So
like it can be personalized. I mean, it might not be a blanket prescription for everybody, but something that's meaningful to you that you connect with.
absolutely.
You can then follow up your statement to somebody with that in order
Hmm.
to um, ward off the negative energy that might come out with the positive.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
saying something, like people, there are people, I mean, who might be uncomfortable when you say something like "God bless you" to them.
sure.
That's okay. You don't have to necessarily say it out loud. If you're saying something inside, if you're, vocalizing it internally,
Mm-hmm.
and you're saying, you know, "Beautiful new car," and to yourself saying, "May it always be so," and safety.
Yeah,
And, you're saying this yourself.
sure.
I think you've done the work of making sure that you've not given the evil eye. And again, being the fact that you brought the question up is more than 50% there, because if you're aware of it,
Mm-hmm.
and you're aware that you don't want to mistakenly give this evil eye, your intention of not wanting to is already there.
There.
And that stands for a whole lot. That
Mm-hmm.
stands for a whole lot.
Sure.
The second, how can people find out, or how do people know? So um, in in the book, I talk a lot about recognizing the evil eye, the signs
Mm-hmm.
and the symptoms. There are many, many ways to diagnose the evil eye.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, and later on, I was taught many of those methods. They have to do with oil and water. There are different prayers and incantations you can say that will tell you specifically if you have the evil eye. Versus some other, sort of generational curse or something like that. The rituals and the incantations I give are specific for the evil eye. So you can find in there many ways to diagnose the evil eye. Oil, water, there's a whole method in there. They're not difficult methods,
Mm-hmm.
but you can find out if you have the evil eye by looking at these simple methods. And then if you do see that there is the evil eye, you've
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed, you can see the signs there that I've mentioned in the book.
Mm-hmm.
There are simple ways actually also to remove them. Again, they don't always revolve around prayer, but I do have prayers for every tradition in there, and incantations for every tradition. But then there are also, the power of nature and the power of the botanicals, the power of
Mm-hmm.
bay leaves. You're going out there, going out to a meeting, a party, whatever it is. You think you're going to come up against negative energy and people who might be not necessarily wishing you the best. And listen, a simple ritual, a simple thing to do, take 2 bay leaves, put them in your pocket. You go out, go about your meeting, go about your day. You come home, you burn those bay leaves.
Yeah.
Same thing with a sprig of rosemary. You put that in your pocket. So nature holds tremendous power, and it's all around us. I speak about that as well, and also about methods to use very simple incense to smoke away the negativity mainly not only in our field, our life, here around us, but in the home, in
Yeah.
the car. look at your home a lot. What are the windows? The windows are the eyes of a home.
Mm,
You know, people are
yeah.
looking in, you're looking out. Simple things like taping a sprig of rue or a sprig of rosemary to a window. These are all simple things that you can do to make sure that the evil eye is either, you're going to either, ward it away or banish it. And of course, I know we don't have enough time for it, but of
Mhm.
course, in the book, I speak a lot about amulets
Yeah.
and the power of certain amulets
Yeah.
across many different traditions. And I encourage people to look into the use of amulets
Yeah, I was
as
gonna
well.
say, well, I was gonna say, are crystals a thing too? Because my wife and I have been kind of reading more about crystals and kind of getting into that sort of thing. And I know that different crystals carry different energies, so I would imagine there's
Mhm.
some crystals that might be able to do the same.
Crystals are
Mm,
immensely powerful, and there are some wonderful books about crystals. And if you go to just even my publisher's page, Wiser Books, you will see so many wonderful books about just specifically regarding the power of crystals. And I have just recently begun myself to, I mean, not so recently, I've been doing it for a while, but now more intentionally, um, and really like taking the crystals and recognizing the power of
yeah.
crystals. So I encourage anyone to definitely go on the Wiser site and look at the books that are there. Many wonderful books about crystals.
Awesome. Well, my friend, we are just about out of time, but this has been a lot of fun.
So
Thank you again.
fast.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for making space for me and for our listeners, and thank you for your work. You've opened my mind a lot, so thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you for reading. It was a great pleasure to be here, Glenn. And I really look forward to being on the show again.
Absolutely. And before you go, real quick, where can people find you online? Do you have any online spaces you hang out in, or where can they find your work?
Sure, they can find me on all, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, but of course my website is my name, AntonioPagliarulo.com. It's also accessible through ItalianWitch.com.
Mhm.
So yeah, but my name.com, AntonioPagliarulo.com is my website, and all of the in social media, I'm there. You'll find me.
Awesome. Well, I'll put the
Yeah.
links in the show notes, and we'll do it again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I tell you, know you, throw a tantrum, you're never satisfied with what you have. Every day's an off day if you don't get your way. Scream more until your throat gets sore. Jump on the direct express. Let's make it right. Don't be a spoiled brat, baby. Get out tonight. Oh, get out tonight. Oh, yeah, you know what I want. Never pants in any weather. The world revolves around you. Greedy and a bit needy. That's what I like about you. Your perky, pouting lips, oh, put your love on me. Oh, I beg and bribe to get to you. But how much can I